Welcome everybody to today's webinar. This is part of a series called Fundamentals of Running a Successful Business. Today's topic is Insurance Basics for Business, and we're joined by Regina Jasak from the Regina Jasak Insurance Agency as our speaker today, presenting today's topic and answering your questions. Before we get started, I'll kindly ask that you please make sure to rename yourself. We would want your first and last name so you get credit for being here with us today. These are the instructions on how to do that. So if you look at the participants list or even your own name, you may not be able to see the participants list actually because we're using Zoom webinar. Make sure that your first and last name is showing up. If not, please rename yourself. We kindly appreciate it, especially when we get to that Q&A. It's hard to say, hey, Galaxy X8, what's your question? That's really awkward. We want to know your name so we can actually call you out by name. So we appreciate it if you can go ahead and rename yourself. Take a minute to do that. There's the steps on the screen. And I see most of you have done it. I think there's only one last person there who needs to do it. I see a last name there, Wilson, but I don't know the first name. But we got to move on because we don't have a lot of time and we want to make sure we cover all the topics. So also the feedback form will be emailed to you via Eventbrite. So you'll get like a nice little email asking you to fill out a 1-minute survey. It's actually 5 questions. So it's super easy to do. And that'll be awesome if you can go ahead and fill that out for us. I'm going to stop my share. I have one other slide I want to share with you. Let's see here. That's the thing when you have so many slides to share. So this is now, I'm going to show the schedule for the webinar series. All of the webinars you can sign up for at Eventbrite. And we had our first one last week. And this week we have Insurance Basics for Business. Next week, we'll be looking at Legal Considerations for Business. That's April 13th, April 20th, Human Resources, Part 1. April 27th, Part 2 of Human Resources. May 4th is Managing Business Financials and Bookkeeping. And May 11th will be Conflict Resolution in the Workplace. So this webinar series is brought to you with the help of many organizations here in the Valley. We're called the Western Mass Miss Business Collaboration, and we have the Center for Women and Enterprise, Common Capital, Franklin County CDC, Valley Community Development, SCORE, the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center. We're all part of this collaboration, and we couldn't bring this programming to you without the assistance from our funders, the Small Business Administration, the state of Massachusetts, and also UMass Amherst, and we're approved by America's SBDC. So thank you all for your sponsorship and for helping bring this education to you free of charge. And without further delay, Regina, you have the floor. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. This is so much fun. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Whoop, there we go. Let me know when did it go? There we go. There we go. Okay, so we're going to work on some basic business insurance stuff. And we're going to try touching on a couple different kinds of policies that you may want to make sure that you have in place for your business. And if you don't have them in place, then learn that you need to grow into them and then learn how to tweak your insurance as you go along. So the types of insurance coverage that you want to consider. So if you own the building that you're going to be owning, that you're going to be running your business out of, obviously you're going to want to be having some building coverage. So that's going to actually cover the actual physical damage to your commercial property. And I know that we have a commercial real estate person here. So you'll want to advise your clients when they purchase the real estate that you're going to sell them that they need to have building coverage. And that also includes anything that is permanently attached to the building. So if you're buying a building that contains a restaurant, the restaurant equipment inside, the the hoods and all that other stuff is generally considered to be building coverage when you go to insure it. And a good insurance agent will know that and will be able to figure out what that valuation looks like. Another type of coverage, which most of you are going to probably need, is business personal property coverage. And that can cover anything that is not physically attached to the building. So there's a lot of different kinds of businesses. It could cover anything from file cabinets to room dividers to chairs. You see, I have a picture there of the break room. So the soda machine, the cabinetry, the coffee pot, the cups, all that stuff, as well as all of your business supplies that you would have in your desk or a supply closet. Anything that the business owns and it's not part of the building is included under your business personal property coverage. So you want to make sure that you evaluate that appropriately, make sure you have the correct limit on that policy. And that policy can be increased as the amount of stuff that you require in your business is also increased when you go out shopping and buy new stuff as you grow. So that number can be tweaked along the way, midterm in the middle of a policy or at renewal, whatever you feel more comfortable with. You're going to want to learn that you need general liability insurance. Now, you can buy property insurance separately and you can buy liability policies separately. Some people feel they don't want any coverage for their business personal property, so they only buy general liability insurance. And that actually protects you, the business owner, against liability claims for bodily injury and property damage that happen at your location, where your office, where your business is. It also transports with you to wherever you may be doing a job. So a contractor may have an office, so he has liability in his office. And then when he goes to the job site, that travels along with him to go to that job location. And it also covers your products and completed operations. So a restaurant, your product is the food that you prepare, and your completed operations would be also that food. If someone were to get ill or something from your food for some bizarre reason, you would have liability coverage to protect your business from lawsuits arising out of that. And you also get some coverage for what's called advertising and personal injury, which is PI liability, which in the event that you do wrongful advertising or cause any personal injuries, which is libel, slander, defamation of character to other people, your general liability policy will cover that. Personal injury and advertising also will reflect into your social media. Sometimes we have to be very careful about how we reflect in somebody else's business. And, there could be lawsuits filed in the event that somebody doesn't like what you say about them. We've heard about some crazy things in the news recently. So just beware that general liability can cover all of that. Another kind of coverage that you're going to want to consider is your business auto coverage. So you may own vehicles in your business. They can range anything from a private passenger type of a sedan. It can be a minivan. It could be a big, huge dump truck, or it could also be a panel truck. It could be a tractor trailer. It could be a whole lot of different kinds of vehicles that you may need to have in your business auto fleet. There's also coverage that you can obtain that I suggest every business owner obtains, which is called hired non-owned auto coverage, which actually covers the business from the employee from utilizing their personal car for business purposes. And it can get a little complicated, but you want to make sure that the business is protected in the event that your employee causes somebody bodily injury while they're using their car for your business purposes. So if they're going to the post office or to the bank, or in my business, we run to the registry. So running to the registry, if they're using their car, want to make sure that we have coverage for them utilizing their vehicle. So we want to make sure that that is covered. Usually I will automatically include it, and my clients may not know that they have the coverage until they actually need the coverage. And then they're like very happy that I just know that they would need it. So business auto coverage is very important. And another very important coverage is workers' compensation coverage. And everybody thinks that this is actually a benefit for the employee. Well, yes, the employee does get their medical bills covered in the event that they're injured at work. And they do get a portion of their pay for missing time because of that injury. However, workers' compensation is actually a benefit for the employer. And I say that because if an employee is injured and you carry workers' comp, they, except in very limited cases, they cannot sue you for that injury. So let's say an employee, so we have a picture there of an employee falling off his chair and onto the floor in the office. So he falls off his chair and he gets injured, and he says that you know, the chairs are the cause of the injury, he got hurt, and he goes to sue you. Well, if you have workers' comp, he can't sue you because he's getting his medical bills and his lost wages. And that's part of the employer's liability, which is built into workers' comp. So it actually benefits you as an employer to have workers' compensation coverage. So don't think it's for the employee, it's actually for you. So make sure that if you have an employee or, and it doesn't matter if they're W-2 employees or 1099 employees or anything like that, if you have direct control over them, they're going to be considered your employee, and you don't want to get stuck with any fines or anything like that. So workers' comp is very important, and it doesn't have to be that expensive. So from what I saw in the chat box, a lot of you have very low rates for your classification of business for workers' comp. So just get coverage if you need it. Business interruption insurance is another type of coverage that you need to consider. It actually gives you coverage for your loss of business income in the event that you can no longer conduct business in your location because of a covered cause of loss. Which, I mean, you have to have a loss that's covered by your policy in order to have the business income kick in. That could be anything from the building collapse there. Obviously, they can't do business in their building, so their loss of business income can pay for that while they're down repairing their building. You know, a fire, a restaurant out of fire, they have loss of income because they can't have clients into their restaurant to serve food to. So they would have loss of business income with that. Also, there's a little portion in there that's loss of business income due to civil authority. So as you guys may recall, there was a gas explosion, and they had a in downtown Springfield several years ago, and they had a few blocks cordoned off from around that explosion area, and anybody that was inside there couldn't get in there to conduct business, even if their business was not personally affected from that explosion. So it was locked down from civil authority. So if those businesses within there that did not have physical loss to their location because of the explosion, but couldn't get there because they were told they couldn't, their business income coverage was able to provide them coverage for their loss of income when they couldn't get into the location, if that makes any sense to you. So that's a very important part. Another part of the business interruption policy is called extra expense coverage. So if you have a loss, let's say the building there that's on the screen that had the roof collapse was able to get up and operational in another location. I'm sorry, the dog, I have a guest dog here. So if they weren't able to get into another, they could get into another location to conduct business, the policy would pay those extra expense coverages for them moving to that location. The additional rent while they're building there that was collapsed is fixed so they can move back in. So that's a very important coverage as well. So know that that is also available, and it's important. You guys put a lot of time, blood, sweat, money, tears into your businesses, and you don't want to see it go away because something happens to your physical location. So, and it's not that expensive either, honestly. So I thought I would show you some examples of what an actual policy looks like. Now, every company has policies that look different. Sort of. They're all going to have some basic features on them, and we'll go over a few of those. So what's really cool is that the insurance industry figured out in the late 70s, early 80s, I believe, that if they took property coverage, which you can buy by itself, and you added it to general liability policy, you could come up with, ta-da, the business owner's policy, or the BOP, as us insurance people like to call it. And it actually combines property and liability together at a discounted rate. So it's more cost effective to buy this type of policy than it is to buy standalone property policies or a standalone general liability policy. You also get some added features thrown into these business owners policies that assist people when there is a claim. So most of the business owners policies out there, they already come with your business income or business interruption coverage built into them, which is actually really a nice feature. So most of you are probably going to qualify for a business owner's policy, and the rate is going to be much less. You're going to get your property and your liability all together in one fell swoop with one company. Oh, I'm going to go back a slide, sorry. So on this, you're going to see that you're going to have your name of your insured. I blacked this out because this is actually a client's deck page. I didn't want you to, I wanted to be confidential. So we're going to have our named insured up there. We're going to have our policy dates. We're going to have our policy number. We're going to have the type of entity there are. I saw that, I believe it's next week in this seminar webinar series, you're going to learn about different kind of business entities that you can form to help protect yourself and your business from losses. You're also going to have what kind of coverage form on the property that you have that you need to select, and then you're going to have your annual premium on the deck. It's called the declarations page, and it's like the front sheet of every policy that you have. You have it on your personal auto policy. You also have a declarations page for your homeowner's policy. So this is just a business owner's declarations page. And then here, we're going to show you, like, this is where the policy comes in. So it's going to give the address and the location of the building. It's going to give a description of what kind of business it is. In this instance, you see that it's an advertising agency. You're going to see that there is a deductible on the property, and this client has a $500 per occurrence deductible on his property. So if he has a property loss, there's going to be a $500 deductible. Just like on your personal auto policy, you have on your comp and collision coverage, you usually have a deductible. So that's what the same thing here. And then you go down into the different coverages available. So this client does not own the building that he's in. So he has no building coverage. He doesn't have an interest in doing so. He does have business personal property. So he has an office, and he has $11,000 of business personal property in the office. And that consists of, desks, chairs, business supplies, bookcases, equipment that this client utilizes in conducting his advertising agency. There's also coverage for on this business owner's policy, which is a really cool thing, which is called money and security. So in the event that there is a theft or disappearance of money inside your premise, you have up to $10,000 worth of coverage this client has, and outside the premise. So if he's like going from his business to the bank and something should happen, he has $5,000 worth of coverage for that purpose for money and securities. So as we said, the business owner's policy actually combines the property, which we just talked about, with the general liability portion. And this is the part of the policy that shows you the liability. So this client, again, carries $1 million worth of liability insurance, and that is a standard limit. So when you start seeing people, when you go to rent a space to open your business or to lease a space, and they're asking you for $1 million liability policy, don't think that they're asking you for a lot, because that is the normal limit. Anything less than that does not really save you any money. So $1 million is absolutely normal, and it's just customary that that's the minimum that anybody's going to ask for. Your liability policy also gives you some medical expense coverages for anybody other than you and your employees getting injured because of your business operations. They also have some personal and advertising injury coverage. We talked about that earlier. However, since this particular client is in advertising, they do not want to cover his advertising injury under his general liability policy, because that would actually be what's called be covered under a professional liability policy. And general liability does not want to pick up professional liability exposures. They don't want to cover the professional, so they'll exclude it on that for him, for this particular advertising agency. We also have some coverage for any damage to premises rented to you, so which is a very important coverage. So when you sign a lease, you may or may not be required to cover the structure that you are renting. And it's important that your insurance agent knows what your lease is. So when I speak to a client, I say, can I get a copy of your lease? Because it's going to tell me in that lease what my client is supposed to insure, and the limits, and also who the landlord is, and all that other stuff that I need to know in order to make sure my client is well protected and meets those guidelines of that lease as best as I can. So there's some coverage for the actual structure of the premises that you lease, if you're required to do that, if you cause damage to that premises, and that. So there's some coverage there. Your general aggregate and your products completed operations limit is always going to be, well, for the most part, is going to be double your general liability limit. So when somebody talks to you about they want $1 million liabilities, they want $1 million per any one instance. Okay, so you need a policy that gives you the ability to have the possibility of having more than one instance on a policy year. You don't want to have one thing happen and then have no more insurance for the rest of the year. So when we talk about aggregate, that's like the pot of money that is available to you on any 12-month policy term for your policy, available for you. So $1 million per occurrence, 2 million aggregate. So if you have $1 million out, you get $1 million left. You still have insurance available. So that's a very positive thing. I hope that wasn't confusing. It can get a little confusing every now and again, but if you want further clarification, let me know and I'll go through it again. As you see here, down here at the bottom, he does this particular advertising agency. If you see down there, it says hire non-owned auto liability. So there it is. I put it in this policy because this client does not own any business autos. All employees utilize their own personal vehicle if they need to do something for the business. So I want to make sure that this business is protected in the event that the employee causes somebody else injury. So that's where you would see it on your deck page for your general liability coverage. Again, I said that there's a whole lot of stuff that's thrown into a business owner's policy. And here we go. We're having our business interruption coverage is going to be on here as well. We have some various coverages in here, but here's our business income coverage page where we're going to get our loss of income. We have up to 30 days for extra expense coverage. So it gets a little more involved in that. I don't want to get too detailed. This is just an overview, easy breezy overview, but it's included in this business owner's policy. And this is what a workers' compensation policy looks like. So this is, again, another actual policy of one of my clients. We have the declarations page shows the policy number. It will say the named insured. It will tell you who the agency is. That's what they mean by producer. That will give the agency name. It will show you the policy period. In workers' compensation, it's very important to pay attention to policy periods, especially when you start getting into larger premium amounts. And then you're going to see highlighted in blue there that employer's liability insurance. So this policy pays up to $500,000 for each accident, $500,000 for each policy for limit by disease, and up to $500,000 for each employee. And that's if the other than the actual injury. So the person falls down and they get hurt, they get their medical bills paid, they get unlimited loss of business, loss of their earnings and things like that. But employer's liability covers in the event of the liability portion of the workers' comp for, so that's important, those numbers. The standard numbers are 100, 100, 500. So that's what that looks like. Then you go into, on the workers' compensation, you start talking about, it's going to list, again, the named insured on the second page. It's going to give you the effective date again. It's going to list your FID number, your EIN or FEIN. That's the number that you utilize from the IRS all the time. So that's going to be an important number for you to make sure that you keep documented, keep that piece of paper that you get from the IRS. It's going to give your name again. The named insured is going to be listed on there. This client's declarations page, this is actually a collision repair shop client. So he is classified as an automobile body repair. That's what the classification is utilized for that. And there's the number 8393. That is the code, the workers' compensation code that classifies them to that automobile body repair shop. And you see there that the premium basis is based on his total annual remuneration. Remuneration is compensation. It's a fancy Nancy word for compensation. So payroll goes into this. It used to be sometimes the value, old time farmer area doctors would go out and they'd do house visits and they might get paid with a chicken. So the valuation of the chicken would have to be included in the remuneration if it wasn't like a typical payroll kind of thing. Our life has gotten simpler where now we just pay everybody money, but remuneration can be a lot of different ways. It depends on how you're paid. Bartering would really need to go in there. So this particular client has $603,842 in estimated annual payroll, and his rate is $1.20 per $100 of payroll. So for every $100 of payroll, he pays $1.20 for workers' comp premium to cover his employees for those injuries. There's also a whole lot of, you see highlighted there in green, that there are a lot of things that the state adds on to the actual workers' comp policy that are fees and taxes, et cetera, et cetera. It is normal. It is customary. We can't get rid of them. It is what it is, but unfortunately they're assigned to each policy. And everybody pays them happy or not, that's what we get to do. They all have a purpose. I could explain the purpose, but I believe that that's probably a little further than what this webinar is actually supposed to cover. And then we have the all-important workers, well, the certificate of liability insurance. So this document is something that your insurance agent needs to prepare on behalf of you to provide to somebody who is asking for it. So people who could ask for it could be your landlord. So your landlord may want a certificate of insurance showing that you actually have insurance on the property. It could be, if you're a contractor, it could be you could be asked to provide this to whoever you're working for. So a contractor may provide it to a homeowner where they're like doing a kitchen repair or a bathroom update. So what it does is it lists the date at the top that the document is issued. It gives, again, the producer's name on there, who's doing the document for you. It gives my contact name because I'm the producer on this particular one. It's going to list the insurance companies that are involved with the insurance program for the client by name up there under the insurers. It's going to list the insured's name and address. Obviously, I whited this one. I cleared this one so that confidentiality. And then you see there underneath the letter, the insured letter, it says A. So you go back up there to insurer A, and that's the insurance company that covers that. So then it lists their policy number and the effective dates for their general liability and their limits. So there's their limits for this particular client. If they have auto liability, or if it's just typical hired non-owned, it would be included, but you list their auto liability there. There's their policy number. This particular client, I don't recall who it is off the top of my head, but they have hired non-owned auto. They have garage keepers legal liability coverage. It must be the same repair shop that I had before up. Scheduled auto, so that means that they own some autos and it's scheduled just like on your personal auto policy. And they have coverage for non-owned autos as well. So then there's also their policy number, that policy effective date, and the limit of insurance for their auto policy is included there. And then down below that, you see their the new letter B for their workers' comp there. Go up to the top and see that Travelers writes their workers' comp. There's their policy number, the effective dates, and the limits for the workers' comp. And then this document needs to be prepared by your insurance agent for every single person who's requesting it. So a new document needs to be generated for each person. So for example, if you're a contractor and you're going out to do a job and you give one homeowner a certificate of insurance, that homeowner's name should have Jane Doe, 1 Main Street, Springfield, Massachusetts as the requesting party. And then when you go to the next job, you should be getting another one of these for that homeowner. So it would say John Smith, 7 Walker Avenue, East Long Meadow, Massachusetts, and then that zip code. So this needs to be prepared for each person who's requesting it. It does not take long for us to do them. I can do a certificate of insurance probably, depending on what my office workflow is, I can usually get them done and out to the person requesting them within an hour, if not quicker. So they can be done very quickly. And just as an FYI, just because I like to be educational when I'm doing these types of things, if you're hiring somebody to come to work for you personally in your home or in your business, you can ask them to provide this to you and keep it on file in the event that something should happen down the road and you need to figure out who their insurance company was. It's way easier to get the information up front than after something happens on the backside. So don't feel like you're asking for a lot, asking for a certificate of insurance. It's normal, it's customary. Insurance agents issue them all the time. And don't feel guilty about it. I will tell you that if you are bidding jobs and you are going to be, I saw some people asking about different certifications and things like that, but if you're bidding jobs and you're signing contracts for these jobs, please, 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 please let your insurance agent see the contract before you sign it to make sure that you have the appropriate coverage that the contract is asking for. Because if you sign the contract, you still are going to be providing the insurance and the coverage that they're asking for in the contract. It's just your insurance program from your insurance agency or your insurance company may not be providing that because they either don't provide the coverage, or they haven't been told to provide the coverage, or they haven't been advised that you signed the contract saying that you've been having the coverage. So please, when you're going to sign the contracts, share them with your insurance agent so that they can make sure that you have the appropriate coverage, because otherwise it's still going to be covered, but it's going to be covered by you personally in your business and not from your insurance. And just want to make sure that you are safe when you are doing contracts for jobs. Let's see, I believe we're talking about things that are not covered unless you buy it. So the business owner's policy is really fabulous. You get a whole lot of stuff built into it. You can buy your separate liability policy, or you can buy a separate property policy, and you can buy your workers' comp, and you can buy your business auto policy. But some important things that you could need, but you don't have coverage for unless you buy a separate policy for, would be number one right now is huge is cyber insurance. So cyber insurance covers you in the event that you're get attacked by ransomware, some malware. We've heard recently the state of Massachusetts RMV vendor who's in charge of the software program for the inspections, for the inspection stickers, had a malware attack, and that system is down. So a malware attack like that would be covered by cyber insurance. Data breaches, if somebody goes in and like steals your data, if you're taking credit card payments, you need to make sure that you have the correct coverage for your credit card machine to make sure that you're not getting hacked into your credit card machine and your bank accounts and all that other stuff. So cyber insurance, get some if you're doing anything. And then if you have a website, you want to make sure that you have coverage for that as well. It is not that expensive to do. Just make sure that you contemplate that when you're like building your insurance program. Earthquake is not covered by the standard property coverage. You can buy coverage for earthquake. So and we are on a fault line. So if you want to know about earthquake coverage, speak to your insurance agent about that. If you are in a professional business, like an insurance agency, a real estate agent, if you're doing website design, if you're doing, if you're an accountant, if you're a CPA, if you're in the medical field, if you're a massage therapist or anything like that, talk to your agent about your professional liability and some errors and omissions insurance coverage. It's not that expensive to buy, but it can be highly expensive if you don't buy it, because what I failed to mention, and I'm very sorry, but what I failed to mention is your general liability insurance. Not only does it cover you for the liability judgment that may happen against you, but it also pays for your defense costs. So it pays for that attorney, right? So and the attorney's fees are whatever they are, they cover them unlimited, right? So attorneys are very expensive, but you have to have coverage in order to be able to get the attorney fees coverage. So the general liability does not cover professional or errors and omissions. So you would have to buy professional liability and errors and omissions insurance if you are in those types of professions. And if you don't buy it and you get sued for some wrongful doing based on professional liability or errors and omissions, your general liability is not going to provide you an attorney. So it's worth the cost alone to pay for insurance because it's going to cover you and give you an attorney to represent you against any lawsuits that may cover. That makes sense to you. So you have to have the coverage in order to get the attorneys covered when it comes to the liability. So don't be afraid. Talk to your agent about it. It's not necessarily expensive. So just have the conversation so that you can educate yourself whether or not you need it personally or not. Again, flood insurance is not covered under a property policy, just like it's not covered under your homeowner's policy. So if you are looking for business flood coverage, you can buy a separate policy just like you can for your homeowners. I saw pictures of what happened in West Springfield last week with the water main breaking and the water like everywhere. I felt so bad for those people because I'm sure they didn't have flood, but that was a flood. So flood insurance would not be covered under property. And then if you're making a product and something happens and you need to like recall all your product back. We all heard about when there's a recall on your car, you know, they said, go to your dealership and have your car fixed. And then a few years back, they had that recall on the engine from Volkswagens where the engine was bad and they had to like take and buy all those Volkswagens back, et cetera, et cetera. So there's actually an insurance product called product recall where you can actually pay for insurance that will recall the product in the event that you need to do that for whatever reason, whether it's something that happened or if it's a defect and you become aware of it, you want to recall it before you have any liability losses or professional liability claims. So if you're in that instance, your agent should recommend it to you, or if you're questioning yourself, you can request information from your agent on product recall as well. So that is the end of my slides. I built this specifically to answer questions.
Excellent. Yes. So Regina, we do have a few questions in the chat. Go ahead and unshare your screen. Go ahead and stop sharing. We can see each other better that way, and you can see us better. Thank you. All right. So yes, so we have one of the attendees here. So we're doing Q&A now, and I'm going through some of the questions in the chat and in the Q&A. So one of our attendees is a landlord. They own a commercial building. What insurance do they need to have on their side? And also, what does the tenants need to have on their side in regards to insurance? I think you covered that a little bit in your presentation, but can you remind us what that is?
Of course. So obviously, you're going to want to make sure that you have an attorney look at your lease requirements and write a lease that is appropriate for you. So make sure that you have an attorney involved in that. So generally, and we're going to say generally because I don't know your specifics. So generally, the landlord is going to insure the actual structure of the building, as well as some liability that you have as being a building owner and renting out the property. So the building owner is going to have that. And then whoever rents your space is going to cover their personal items that they have inside of your building. So if you're renting to a hair salon, for instance, that hair salon should cover, you know, their beauty products and their chairs and their mirrors and all that other stuff, as well as the liability that is associated with that business. So the beauty parlor is going to have liability for people coming and going and for, you know, putting products on people's hair and all that other stuff. So that is what the tenants are going to need. More specific than that, I would really need to like have more of a conversation, but generally that's what you're going to have. And just make sure that you get the certificate of insurance from your tenants every year showing that they have insurance so that you don't get stuck without them having coverage.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Great advice. And can you please explain more what you meant by when you said that before a business owner signs a contract, they should show the contract to their insurance agent? What did you mean by that? I mean, that if I had to show my contracts to my insurance agent every time, that would be a lot of work, a lot of time spending with my insurance agent.
Okay, that's what your insurance agent is for, is to advise you. You're signing a contract, and within those contracts are requirements from those people saying that you're going to have so much insurance, you're going to have this, you're going to be responsible for that. We need to, you need to have coverage for XYZ. Well, if you don't have the coverage, I can't issue a certificate saying that you do if you don't have the coverage. And then oftentimes that coverage adds cost to you. So you may want to know if something's going to cost you more money for that contract, so you could contemplate that in how much you're charging somebody for the contract.
Okay, now I better understand. So this is more applicable to folks who are bidding for jobs. You know, you are going after a particular contract, whether it's with a private sector, another business, or whether it's with government. And most of the time, almost all of the time, they tell you what your requirements are. In order for you to get this job, we need you to have X amount of insured, or bonding requirements or whatever it is. So before you sign on the dotted line or send in your bid, to get that job, be sure to consult with your insurance agent to make sure you have the coverage that you need for that job, and in advance how much it's going to cost you, so that then when you give your quote for those services, you take that into consideration. That's great advice. Excellent.
Yes.
So there's another question here about I think this has to do with recall of products. What if a business sells a baked product, a product that is baked, is it's an edible, something that people will eat, and an ingredient that they use gets recalled? Not the product itself, not the final baked good, but an ingredient that they use to bake that good got recalled. What would be covered? What would be their situation?
Well, the person who made the final end product would be covered by their general liability. Obviously, if you're baking a pie and you're using flour that inadvertently got recalled, right? Somebody could end up getting sick. So your general liability would cover that sickness from them eating your end product, but you're not going to, as a small business, you're not necessarily going to do product recall. As you grow larger and maybe you're like this big, huge commercial manufacturing plant and you're like making, like, was it Happy Time pies or whatever? Or those, is that the name of the ones that are, I don't know. I don't know. The ones that you see at this supermarkets, the little Happy Time, little happy pies or whatever. When you start getting larger, then you can worry about recalling it but if you're baking pies, 10 pies, 20 pies a day, those pies are going to be out in the marketplace. You're not going to really have anything to recall because people are going to have eaten them already.
Right. They don't last that long.
Right.
Hopefully.
Yeah, if you're really good,
Hopefully they get eaten really fast. And hopefully nobody gets sick either.
Right, exactly.
Yes, excellent. And then another participant here, she owns a hair salon. And as you know, many hair salons, barbershops, they rent a booth or a chair. So should both the renter and the owner, should have liability insurance?
Yes, because when you're renting a chair, it's sort of the same as owning the commercial building, just like the commercial property owner. So you own the space and you're renting a small space in the salon for somebody else to conduct business for. So that stylist in your salon can get their own policy to cover their behavior and products and things and their clients when they come in and out of the salon, so that you have extra protection from those as well. So yes, both.
Okay.
And it's not expensive, just so you know.
All right. All right. And there was a question earlier in the chat. I don't know. I think maybe this interview has already left, but or maybe she's still here. This person owns commercial real estate, and she wonders if you know in general, or if you can give some advice as to what government and state agencies are typically looking for in terms of insurance requirements. Both for, I think, why don't we answer this for commercial property, like when government is going to rent offices, say for like the public schools or Department of Health or whatever. And I think if you can also talk a little bit about contracts as well.
Okay, so the larger the entity is, so when you start talking about state, city, state, federal entities, they are going to ask for more stuff for you to carry in order to protect them. Okay, so they're going to ask for language in an insurance policy to provide protections to them. And they're going to ask for probably higher limits. They may ask for more liability limits. So an umbrella policy may have to come into that. I didn't touch on them, but you can buy higher liability limits. So that's an extra cost to you. They could ask for, I mean, they ask for all kinds of stuff. They'll ask for things that will be very difficult sometimes to even get. So they'll ask for very specific stuff, because don't forget, those people also have insurance agents and lawyers working for them, telling them what to ask for to lessen their responsibility and their liability in the event of something happening. So they ask for everything and your firstborn child, and then it's up to you to figure out what they're asking for. Have your insurance agent tell you if you can get it or not, and how much extra it's going to cost you in order to do that. And yeah, I actually have one client who has a contract. I'll give you a specific. I have one client who has a contract who they are asking for some very specific coverage information language in the policy, which the company that my client is written with doesn't provide. I can't get. And they do something that is like really unique. So it's not like I can move them to another company to get what they're looking for. So I just can't provide it. It's not available. So they either have, the client has to negotiate, or I actually will call and I'll negotiate them not having to have that requirement. But sometimes it's very challenging.
Right, right. And another question, is it advisable to also ask the landlord for his insurance coverage if you're the tenant? Because this particular individual has heard of businesses that had problems with their landlord who couldn't take care of the plumbing for the building, for example, that caused a flooding issue in the building, and that interrupted their business. So how would one go about doing that as the tenant, asking your landlord to provide proof of insurance?
I've heard some issues with some buildings recently. So I don't know that you're going to get your landlord to actually cough up their building information. That may be a very difficult thing to get. However,
I think on the lease, that should all be addressed on the lease, that the landlord is responsible for all of that. But when it comes, so they're responsible for the mechanicals in the building, yes, and general maintenance and things like that. But what if there's an issue, right, with the mechanicals of the building, and it causes a fire or a flood in the building, and then
then it's going to be a breach of contract, because the lease is a contract. So the landlord's not keeping up their end of the lease, right? So then it's going to be a breach of contract, and it's going to be a legal issue. So that is way beyond the scope of an insurance policy, because unless, I mean, the fire in the building, as long as the building owner has insurance, would be covered, right? And the person renting the space, as long as they have insurance, they'll be covered to be for their stuff in the space too if there's a fire, right? But if it's just because the plumbing's old and it decides to break down and the building owner doesn't have the money in his pocket in order to fix it, then that's a breach of contract. And that's when attorneys and stuff would have to get involved. And, you know,
And
it
then
can get a little.
hopefully as the tenant, I have my own insurance who would cover this stuff in my space, you know?
Yes. So your stuff in your space could be covered, but there's, if it's a plumbing issue, your policy is not going to pay for the plumbing issue of the building owner.
No, but it would pay for would it pay for my stuff?
It would pay for your stuff if your stuff got ruined because a pipe broke, yes.
Yeah, stuff I'm meaning like, you know, computers, you know, equipment, furniture, that kind of stuff, you know.
Your stuff would be
Unfortunately,
covered
paper
by your
files and
policy.
such, if they
Right.
get wet, it's probably,
Right.
you know, not recoverable. Yeah.
It could pay for the business. I just see the question from Bernice. The question for the business interruption. Yes, if you're the tenant and your stuff gets damaged because of a broken pipe, okay, and you're out of business because you're waiting for the stuff to get cleaned up, your tenant policy, your business owner's policy will pay for your business interruption, and may also pay extra expense coverage for you to move to a new location while that relocation's being fixed.
Is that standard, or do I need to pay extra for that? Do I need to make sure that's added to my policy?
You need to make sure you have it as part of your policy. Most business owners' policies, the one where you put the property and the liability together, right? That usually is going to have business income in there already. It's interesting because I'm teaching a class tomorrow on property issues, and this is one of the scenarios, but it gets really in depth and I don't want to go too far.
Right. But I'm sure folks can always reach out to you to ask you questions as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so we're just out of time, but we will have one more question here. In regards to products, you know, can folks who own a business can avoid some of the insurance issues by including a disclaimer statement in the store or contracts or in the product labeling? Can they avoid some of the insurance issues by adding disclaimers?
Well, disclaimers and waivers never hurt. However, in essence, they're a piece of paper, and you can't project or foresee if somebody is still going to sue you just because something happens to them. They may see the waiver. I mean, stop and think about it. The Red Sox, they have signs all over Fenway Park that says you may get hit by a foul ball. Please pay attention, right? When somebody gets hurt by a foul ball, we still hear of those people suing the Red Sox, right? So disclaimers work, and there are honest people out there that won't sue because they saw the disclaimer, but then there are always going to be people who will sue just because they see possibility of maybe succeeding and getting a big payout.
I don't know that anyone will on purpose hit someone with a foul ball. That would take a lot of skill to actually throw the ball right at you. But anyways, so we're out of time for today, Regina, but we thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, to present this insurance basics today. For everyone who joined us, thank you so much for attending. I'm going to see if I can flash on the screen one more time the schedule for the upcoming webinars. We love to see you again at a future webinar. As I shown here, we have a lot of different topics. This is not just for people who are just starting a business. This is for folks who are running a business, as well as it is helpful for people who are just starting a business, but both for people who are running a business is very helpful because you can ask real life questions, things that you've already experienced, and add to this. So these are the upcoming webinars. You can sign up for all or any of these webinars individually on Eventbrite, and just look for fundamentals of running a successful business, and it should show up on Eventbrite for you to sign up. Thank you again, Regina, for joining us. And thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. It's beautiful out, so get out there. Take care.